The faucet had been dripping for 11 days. I know this because I log maintenance issues in the same notebook I use for property notes, a habit from my early years in real estate, when I was terrified of forgetting something billable and important. 11 days, kitchen faucet, 14 Ridgecrest Drive. Below it, in parentheses, the way I always note pending action. Warranty check paperwork, Dad has file. My father had been in Lisbon for 3 weeks. He answered on the 4th ring with the distracted courtesy of a man who had already decided the call would be brief. The paperwork's in the hall closet, he said. Second shelf, behind the binders. Which binders? The blue ones, your grandmother's. A pause, I could hear wind or maybe traffic somewhere behind him. I have to go. Okay, Dad, wait. Do you know if it's still under? But he was already gone. Or I thought he was. The line went quiet in a specific way, not the clean cut of a disconnected call, but the muffled, ambient hush of a phone dropped into a jacket pocket. I know that sound. I've accidentally pocket-dialed clients during closing paperwork. I know exactly what it means. I did not hang up. For the first 90 seconds, I heard nothing intelligible. Fabric noise, the muted clatter of what might have been a restaurant. Then my mother's voice, close enough to be distinct. Was that Shirley? Yes. What did she want? Faucet something, I don't know. I set my phone on the kitchen counter of 14 Ridgecrest Drive, my grandmother's kitchen, with its original tin ceiling she'd refused to modernize, and its window overlooking the garden she'd planted in the last good year of her health, and I walked to my bag and took out my second phone, a work phone. I opened the voice memo app and pressed record. Then I came back to the first phone, picked it up, and listened to my father tell my mother that they needed to move on the deed question before he got back. She's manageable, he said. She always has been. She gets difficult when she feels pressured, my mother said. She gets quiet. That's not difficult, that's just Shirley. A sound that might have been ice in a glass. We need to be on that deed before my retirement, he said. Or better, full transfer. There's no reason for her to hold the whole thing in her name. She doesn't even live there full time. She'll say it's what Tracy wanted. Tracy's been dead 4 years. A pause. I stood very still in Tracy's kitchen, with the dripping faucet and the tin ceiling and the garden going gold outside in the late afternoon light. She's a burden, my father said, not unkindly, which was somehow the part that landed hardest. Not with contempt, with the flat, factual register of a man making a budget observation. She was handed that house. She didn't earn it. She won't fight for it because she's not the type. A longer pause. And if she won't sign, it doesn't matter. We're already there. Possession is 9/10. Dennis, I'm telling you how it is. My mother said something too low to catch. Then, what if she finds out about the Mora thing? She won't. Flat, final. The way he closed every subject he considered settled. That's done. I did not know what the Mora thing was. I still don't, entirely. I made a note of it in the same book as the dripping faucet, and I moved on, because I have learned, over the years, to work with what I have rather than grieve what I'm missing. My second phone recorded for another 4 minutes. Then my father's voice shifted. He was speaking to someone else, a waiter maybe, and then the line went properly dead. I picked up both phones. I sat down at Tracy's kitchen table. Outside, the garden light was doing what it does in Asheville in October, going copper and long, slanting through the gaps in the old oak at the corner of the property, laying shadows across the lawn like something placed there deliberately. I sat there for a long time. I did not cry. That came later, and it wasn't for the reasons I expected. I took 3 days. This is the part people never understand when I explain it, that I did not act the same night or the same week. I went to work. I showed 2 properties in Weaverville, wrote up an offer for clients in West Asheville, attended a staging consultation for a Victorian on Kimberly Avenue that needed its furniture re-angled to read larger on camera. I did all of this normally. I ate. I slept adequately. I did not call my parents. On the 4th morning, I called Patricia Holt. Patricia had handled a contract dispute for a client of mine the previous spring, and I had watched her operate across a conference table for 6 hours with the steady, unfrightened energy of someone who has never confused emotion with weakness. She was a property and civil litigation attorney. She did not do family law, she told me at the start of our meeting, but she did do property, and property was what this was. Full title, she confirmed, my grandmother's will open in front of her on the desk. No co-ownership, no conditions. The transfer was clean and the estate closed without dispute. She looked up. They have no legal claim to the property. They've been living there for 4 years. As guests in your property. She set the will down. Did you sign anything? Any kind of cohabitation agreement, informal deed amendment, anything in writing? No. Then it's yours, entirely. She said this without emphasis, which was its own form of emphasis. What are you thinking of doing? Selling, I said. She nodded, as though I'd said something obvious. Luke Daly had been in Asheville real estate for 16 years, and I had known him for 8 of them. He was methodical, discreet, and completely uninterested in the personal dimensions of any transaction. When I called him, he asked 2 questions. What was the timeline, and did I want a public listing? 6 weeks, I said, and no quiet sale. Price? Whatever the market will bear. The property is at 14 Ridgecrest, North Asheville. 4 bedrooms, original details, good bones, decent lot. I paused. It'll sell. Yes, he said, it will. We accepted the offer 41 days later. $915,000, cash, from a corporate executive relocating from Charlotte. He could close in 3 weeks. He did not need a yard sign or an open house or a story about the house. He needed a house, and 14 Ridgecrest Drive was a house. Tracy had paid $60,000 for it in 1987. I began inventorying on a Thursday evening after work, when the light was still good enough to see clearly, and I was still in my professional clothes, which I have always found useful for tasks that require precision over feeling. My grandmother's house had 4 bedrooms, a study, a kitchen, a formal dining room that my mother had repurposed into some kind of display space for objects she'd collected and never used, and a basement that Tracy had used for storage and that my parents had not touched. This was the part of the house that still smelled like her, a specific combination of cedar and old paper, and something floral I could never name, the scent of her organizational systems and her patience and her very specific ideas about which things deserved to last. I had 12 boxes of Tracy's papers in that basement. I had moved them there myself, years ago, when my parents had asked me to clear out the study so my father could use it as an office. I had agreed without discussion and done it on a weekend when they were away, partly because I wanted to be alone with her things. I was on the 10th box when I found the letter. It was in an envelope addressed in her handwriting, my name on the front, no stamp, the flap sealed but not with glue, like she had pressed it closed and then second-guessed sending it, or like she had intended to give it to me in person and not quite found the moment. The date in the corner was 6 weeks before her heart attack. I sat on the cold basement floor in my work clothes, and I read it. Tracy wrote the way she spoke, without decoration, without performance, with the precision of someone who considered language a tool rather than a display. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten on her personal stationery, pale blue, with her name embossed at the top in dark navy. Tracy Lane. She had designed that stationery herself in the 1990s. I remembered the box of it on her desk. She wrote that she had thought for a long time about how to divide what she had. She wrote that Dennis had asked her for money on 4 separate occasions over the past decade, and that she had assisted him twice, and that both times the assistance had not produced what Dennis had said it would. She did not use the word squandered. She wrote the outcomes did not match the intentions, which was her way of saying the same thing without cruelty. She wrote that she had watched her son grow into a man who believed that expectation was the same as effort. She wrote this plainly, with no apology for the observation. She wrote that she was leaving me the house because she believed I understood what it meant to build something, that she had watched me come up in real estate without assistance, without a referral network, without anyone absorbing my early mistakes, and that she thought I would do right by the property. She wrote that she was not leaving it to me as a gift. She was leaving it to me as a trust. The last paragraph was shorter than the others. I hope you don't doubt that you earned this. Not the house specifically, but the life around it, the security of it. I don't imagine Dennis and Mildred will take this news easily. I hope by the time you read this, if you ever do, it has already ceased to matter. I suspect you will have managed it. You always manage things. That's not a burden, Shirley. That's your shape. I sat on the basement floor for a long time. Then I put the letter in my bag, carefully, in the interior zip pocket where I keep documents I do not want bent. I stood up. I went back to inventorying. I did not cry until I was in my car, and even then it was brief, less grief than release, the way pressure equalizes. I drove to my rental and made tea and read the letter again at my kitchen table. Then I put it away. The logistics took 10 days. I opened 2 new bank accounts at a credit union I'd never used and transferred my operating funds. I acquired a new phone number. The work phone stayed, because Luke had it and Patricia had it, but my personal number went dark. I gave the new one only to 3 people. I set up a new email address through a provider I did not use professionally and began redirecting my critical accounts. I found a furnished short-term rental in a small city 2 hours south of Asheville. I had driven through it twice on client trips and had always noticed the quality of the light and the low cost of the storage units near the highway. I signed a 3-month lease under my own name. It was 900 square feet. It had 1 bedroom, a parking space, and a window above the kitchen sink that looked out onto a courtyard with a single large maple that had gone entirely red by the time I moved in. The storage unit I rented in Asheville was 12 by 20. I paid 6 months in advance. I cataloged my parents' possessions with the same software I use for estate inventory, photographed, numbered, logged, and I hired 2 movers I had used for a client relocation the previous year. They were efficient and asked no questions about the house or the circumstances or the fact that I was there alone, wearing a down vest over a dress shirt, directing them with a clipboard. My parents' things filled approximately 2/3 of the unit. I arranged for the access information, the unit number, and the prepaid receipt to be mailed to their Lisbon hotel. I used a courier with international tracking. I kept Tracy's things. The tin ceiling I left because it was the ceiling. The garden I left because it was the garden. But the blue stationery box, the specific rug from her study that had a pulled thread near the left corner that she had never repaired. The photograph of her standing outside this house in 1989, squinting into the sun, with a paint roller in her hand and a look of absolute undefeated intention on her face. The letter. These came with me. I cleaned the house myself on the final day. I am particular about cleaning. I learned it from Tracy, who believed that how you left a place was a form of character testimony. I did the floors last, working backward from the bedrooms toward the front door, the way she had taught me. The kitchen I did carefully. The tin ceiling caught the late light and threw it back in warm, uneven patches the way it always had. The garden outside the window was bare and tidy, and it would be someone else's in 19 days. I stood in the kitchen for a moment, just a moment. Then I took out a single index card. I use them for notes to myself, property specs, things I need to remember, and I wrote on it with the black pen I keep in my jacket pocket. Surprise, a burden did this. I placed it on the counter where it could not be missed. Centered, deliberate. I dropped my keys through the mail slot. The sound they made on the other side, that small, final, metallic report, was the only thing that felt, in that moment, close to dramatic. Everything else had been paperwork and planning and one cold floor. I walked to my car without looking back. Not as a gesture. I simply didn't need to. The first voicemail came 6 days later. My father's voice, confused in a way I had never heard it, asking what was happening, whether I had changed the locks where his files were. My mother's came an hour after. Measured, warm, the professional register she deployed when she was managing a situation. Shirley, sweetheart, call us back. We need to talk. We're sure there's been a misunderstanding. I saved both. I saved all of them. They escalated over the following 2 weeks through confusion into demand, and then, briefly, into something resembling threat language about legal action, about what I owed them, about the years of sacrifice they had absorbed on my behalf, before cycling into a performed concern that was, in its way, the most familiar of all the registers. "We're worried about you. This isn't like you. Something must have happened." What had happened was that I had listened to a phone call and then done my job. The cafe was my choice, a busy place on Lexington Avenue that I knew well enough to feel comfortable and unfamiliar enough that it held no weight for any of us. I arrived 7 minutes late, which was intentional. They were already seated. My mother looked composed. My father looked like a man who had been rehearsing. I ordered coffee. I set my phone on the table with the screen facing up. My father began with the prepared version, something about family, about what was owed, about the disruption I had caused to their lives by acting without consultation. He was measured. He had thought this through. I let him finish. Then I opened the voice memo on my phone, and I played 40 seconds of it. Just 40 seconds, my father's voice in that Lisbon restaurant, saying she's a burden, saying possession is 9/10, saying she won't fight for it because she's not the type. My mother looked at the table. My father's jaw shifted. He started to speak. "Patricia Holt has copies of this recording," I said, "along with the full transcript and the sale documents. The property closed 11 days ago. Your belongings are in a storage unit outside Asheville. You have prepaid access through April." I looked at him. "I don't want anything from you. I want you to understand what happened so that it doesn't need to be discussed again." "Shirley," my mother started. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I'm not negotiating, I'm letting you know." My father stood abruptly. The kind of standing up that is a performance of leaving, a statement about dignity. He said something I have since decided not to remember. Then he left. My mother sat for a moment longer. Her eyes were wet. She said very quietly, "We did love you, we do." I looked at her. I thought about Tracy on her basement floor. I thought about the stationery with her name at the top. I thought about the pulled thread in the rug and the photograph with the paint roller and the last paragraph of the letter. "I know you believe that," I said. I left before she did. I didn't look back from that door either. My apartment had the maple in the courtyard and a kitchen window and 900 square feet of nothing I hadn't chosen. The first weekend I was there, I went to a plant nursery outside of town and bought 3 small things: a rosemary in a terracotta pot, a succulent I couldn't name, and a flat of winter herbs that the woman at the counter said would take to indoor light if the window faced south. Mine faced south. I put them on the kitchen windowsill when I got home. The rosemary went on the left, the succulent in the center, the herbs in a row to the right. I stood at the sink and looked at them for a while. Then I washed my hands and started cooking, something simple, something that needed tending, that would smell like something worth coming home to. The light outside was going, the maple in the courtyard losing its red in the dusk, the courtyard going quiet and dark by degrees. I stirred, I waited. I did not feel peace as a door opening. I felt it as the lifting of a pressure I hadn't named until it was gone, the specific weight of being known by people who had never seen me, of being legible to a narrative I hadn't written. What I felt in its place was smaller and more precise than peace. It was room, air, the absence of a lean I had been bracing against so long I'd forgotten I was bracing. The herbs would take. The rosemary already smelled like itself. I kept cooking.